Good morning. My name is Brian, for those of you I haven't had a chance to meet yet, and I'm one of the ministers here at First Christian. I say I'm one of the ministers because we're all called into different ministries in the church, and one of my ministries is to be the guy fortunate enough to be up here most Sundays trying to illuminate the scriptures for you a little bit. And we are in the middle right now of a sermon series we're calling Crosstalk, Why Our Words Matter, and we're focused on how we speak as people of faith in public discourse, and how do people hear us when they know that we're people of faith? How do they hear us talking? And so the title Crosstalk has kind of a double meaning. It both means how sometimes when we communicate with other people, our conversations, our dialogues get crossed and there's conflict, but there's also the cross itself in there to suggest that it's important as disciples of Christ that we think about how we're heard and how we are talking about the faith and our values to other people. If we think about this idea that words matter, we can probably all think of examples of where we've seen that that's true. Martin Luther King used words to move an entire nation towards reconciliation and a deeper sense of justice. But we also have Adolf Hitler, who used words to move another nation towards discrimination and terrorism. Probably everybody here has been moved by the words of a song at some point in your life that has either lifted you up and made you feel good, or maybe it's made you cry. And I bet if every single person in this room spent a couple of minutes today digging deeply down into your memories of childhood, you can remember words spoken to you by an adult or another person that lifted you up, words that made you feel better about yourself, words like, "You're special," "You matter," "I love you." And I bet that most of us can think of words that were spoken to us in childhood by adults or maybe by other children that diminished us as people, that made us feel smaller. Words like, "You're stupid," "You're ugly," "You'll never amount to anything." Words have power, and even words spoken a long time ago persist over time, and they still can affect who we are as people today. So we need to stop sometimes and think about, what is the effect the words you're speaking today? What effect are they having, not just in the immediate moment, but over time? How will the words you use today, how will the power of those words linger? What difference will your words make for the people that you're speaking them to? So here today from Colossians, Paul's letter to the churches in Colossae. "Devote yourselves to prayer, keeping alert in it with thanksgiving. At the same time, pray for us as well, that God will open to us a door for the word, that we may declare the mystery of Christ, for which I am in prison, so that I may reveal it clearly, as I should. Conduct yourselves wisely towards others, making the most of your time. Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer everyone." Hear that again. Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt. When I was growing up, my mom had a favorite phrase she would use with us, and some of your moms probably use the same phrase. And anytime we would be complaining about one of our brothers or sisters, or if we were complaining about something the teacher had done at school that day, my mom would say to us, "Now, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all." Now, later in life, as I became an adult and I got to know my mom as an adult, you know how that changes over time. She's not so much mom anymore, but she's this person that you know by first name, and you get to know them, and they kind of let their parent guard down a little bit. And I got to know the more cynical, sort of sarcastic side of my mom that was delightful about her. She still used that phrase, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all, but she had picked up a slight variation of the phrase. What my mom loved to say, particularly late in her life, was, "If you can't say something nice, come sit over here next to me." Which, if you knew my mom, that was a really true statement. And I bet there are people here today saying, yes, that could be my mantra too, as I make my way through the day. If you can't say something nice, come sit over here next to me, because I don't have anything nice to say today either. And last week, most of us admitted, I think, that we can't get through a day, let alone a week, without saying something critical or negative to or about another person. That's just sort of embedded in who we are and how we interface with the world. It's being honest. And I had a colleague recently who said that he used to think that it would be great to have the superpower to be able to read people's minds. But since the advent of social media, he's decided that maybe that superpower wouldn't be such a good thing after all, because in essence, with social media, that's what we have. We're able to read people. I mean, people put on social media every thought that's in their head. Have you noticed this? Because some of us do it, right? I mean, every thought goes posted and commented on, and much of it is negative. And I'm not here to knock social media, because you all know, most of you, that I use it a lot. I love Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. I think they're great methods of communication. But I do wonder sometimes if there are some thoughts, some words that would be best unposted, unshared, particularly those that tend to be the kind of words that tear people down, that tend to hurt other people. So Paul, we assume it's Paul, is writing to this group of burgeoning churches in Colossae, this region, and he's suggesting to them that when you go out and speak to people outside of your group, people who are not Christians, people beyond the Christian faith, when you're out in public discourse talking to people, you need to be thoughtful about how you use your words. And he says, be gracious. You know, that's his way of saying, be compassionate, be kind, be thoughtful in the way you're speaking to other people outside of our group, outside of the faith. Now, some of you are thinking, does that even need to be said? Right? Don't we already know that's, I mean, it's people that follow Jesus, follow the guy who's pointing us towards love and kindness and compassion. Wouldn't we just assume that we'd be that way? But are we, is the question. I mean, the question is, how do we speak to other people on Monday through Saturday? And do we speak the same way as we do on Sunday? Or is Sunday the day we reserve for all of our talk about love and compassion and being nice to people and welcoming everybody and being thoughtful, and then the rest of the week we do whatever we want? I heard somebody say recently, really for Christians, every day is supposed to be Sunday. Which is to say, every day should be a sacred day, a holy day, in which we ground ourselves in who or what we understand God to be, and our words should reflect that. Think of it this way. If you were put on trial for being a Christian, and the only evidence against you was the words that you used on Wednesday, not the words you use on Sunday, but the words you use on Wednesday, could you be convicted? So Paul says, when you're speaking, you Christians, when we're speaking to people outside the faith, speak graciously to people. Speak to people, and what's grace? We think of grace being grounded in compassion, kindness, love. He's saying, speak to people that way, whether you think they deserve it or not. Because that's the essence of grace. Grace is God's free gift of love to us. We don't do anything to earn it. It's just given to us. So Paul's saying, if you're going to speak to people, speak graciously to them, whether you think they deserve to be spoken to that way or not, whether they've earned that right from you, because it has nothing to do with whether they've earned it or whether they deserve it. We speak that way because we are people of God. Now, does that mean then that we just got to be nice all the time, that our speech should just be innocuous and vapid and lifeless? Is that what we mean by speaking graciously? Well, then we go to the next thing that Paul says. First he says, speak graciously, but then he says, season your language, your words, with salt. So here's Paul, the apostle, telling us as Christians to have salty language when we're out in public. Probably haven't heard anybody say that in church before. But what does he mean by that? Have salty language. He's saying, season your language in a certain particular way. Now, in Latin, the Romans would use this phrase, cum grano salis, which just means take it with a grain of salt. Now, typically that phrase we use even today, if somebody has said something, they've used their words and said something to us that we don't quite buy or we don't quite trust, and so you'd sprinkle a little salt on it to make it a little more palatable so that you can receive it, right? So you can digest it. And so here's Paul saying, when you speak to people as a Christian, Don't wait for them to have to do that. You salt your own language. You sprinkle it with some flavor that allows them to receive it in a way that they can hear it. Do that in advance. Now, it's in the Gospel of Matthew, you guys might remember, that Jesus says to his disciples, to people like us, you're the salt of the earth. And that's an amazing compliment. We don't often think about it, but he's making a real compliment to his followers because salt in the ancient world was a very sought-after commodity. Sometimes people were paid in salt. Salt was used to purify things. It was used to preserve food long before, obviously, they had refrigeration, so it was really important to have salt around. Whole commodities of cultures were based around salt. Their economies were based on salt. They even fought wars sometimes over salt. So when Jesus says you're the salt of the earth, he's saying you're important. You matter. And so when Paul's telling us to use that salt that we have to sprinkle on our words, he's saying there's something valuable you have, and you need to say things in such a way that people can receive it. In fact, I think what he's saying is, speak to others about your faith in a way that they want to hear more. You know that old cliche, have you ever tried to eat one potato chip out of the bag? Right? No, you don't eat one potato chip. You keep going back and you go back. Why do you keep going back for the next potato chip? Because of the salt. The taste somehow attracts us. And so here's Paul saying, when you're out there talking to other people and talking about the things that matter to us, think about talking about them in a way that other people want to hear more of what you have to say. That they want to know more about this good news that we have to share. Sprinkle a little flavor on it, a little salt. Now, we also know the opposite of this is true also. Too much salt is not a good thing. Anybody make cookies before and put salt instead of sugar in by chance? I hope that's not over here. Anybody did that today? There's a time when so I want to be clear here. Paul is not saying if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. He's not saying that, right? He's saying there's times we need to say things that are important and that maybe people don't necessarily want to hear, but there is a way to talk about them in a way people will listen to us. And they'll accept that we're speaking to them in a way that's respectful. But if we go a little too much with the saltiness, even though we've used good words at some point, if we go a little too far and we get a little too critical, if we're a little too offensive, if we use words that tear down instead of build up, there's a point when people are going to stop listening to us. And all the good words that we may have used up to that point are for naught because we've used too many negative ones. Do you guys know what a word cloud is? Anybody ever put a word cloud together on the internet? There are these programs on the internet where you can take a text and you can paste them into the program, and you can take a piece of something out of a play or out of a poem, or in this case, I took something out of the Bible, you paste it in, and then it regurgitates it to you in this visual form where the words that appear most often in the text become bigger, and the words that only appear once or twice are much smaller. And so this text, probably if some of you studied this long enough, you figure out what it is. It's the Beatitudes. It's part of the Sermon on the Mount. So notice the word blessed appears really big, and it's right in the middle because that word appears over and over. It's one of the words most emphasized in that passage. So imagine this. You're walking around all day long, and you have a virtual word cloud hanging over your head. And that word cloud takes in all the words that you say to other people, and it figures out the words you use the most, and that's the word that appears biggest and right in the middle of your word cloud. What word is appearing in your word cloud? And is it a word you want other people to see? Is it a kind word? Is it a word of compassion? Is it a word of judgment? Is it a critique? Is it a four-letter word? If we're being honest. Words matter. Imagine this. Every day somebody tells you, every day for the rest of your life, I'm going to give you $7,000. You have to spend it by the end of the day, but you have $7,000 from me every day to spend. What are you going to do with that money? You're going to say, wow, $7,000. Think what I could do with $7,000, and you're going to do things worthwhile with it, or are you just going to throw it away? You're just going to use it on things that don't matter or things that aren't good for you. Maybe a little both. Yeah. Researchers have determined that on average, we speak about at least 7,000 words every day. Now, some of you guys are skewing that number much higher. For some people, it's up to like 16,000. But for the average, you speak 7,000 words a day. Now think of the value of at least those 7,000 words you have. Think about what you could accomplish with those 7,000 words every day if you sprinkled them, if you flavored them with the goodness, the kindness, the compassion, the grace of Jesus Christ. What can you accomplish with your 7,000 words? Well, you could bring peace with 7,000 words. You could mend relationships with 7,000 words a day. You could call somebody back from the brink, from the edge, before they give up altogether with 7,000 words. You can help somebody figure out that, yeah, they do matter, despite what other people have used their words to tell them. You could do that with your 7,000 words. Think of the difference you could make with your 7,000 words every day if we were thoughtful about how we speak in a way that's flavored with what we understand to be the essence of the Christian faith. So that word cloud that's hanging over your head right now, if you had to go out into the rest of this week now with it virtually hanging over your head and everybody could see what you're saying, what would you like it to say? What message would you like people to hear that would say to them somehow, there's something to listen to over here. This person's got something. This person's on to something about what life is really about, what love is really about, what compassion is really about, and I want to pay attention to it. What would your words say? Well, you really don't have to wonder about it, do you? Because it's a choice you get to make. It's a choice I get to make every day. To think about how our words matter. To think about using our words to build up the world instead of tear it down. To think about using our words that are seasoned with love and kindness and compassion so that they make a difference, so that they really matter. What words will you use this week? Let's pray. Creative Spirit, guide us with your grace that we might make every word count. That before we speak a judgment on another person, that before we speak a critical word against a child or a stranger, that before we put ourselves or another person down, we might stop and think, how might I better center these words in your grace and your love? Amen.